The weapon is called depleted uranium, which some say could be the cause of the so-called Gulf War syndrome. We'll hear the pros and cons in a few minutes. First, though, let's have some background on the weapon that's known as the silver bullet. Most nuclear weapons begin in a place like this, at a uranium mine. And Canada is home to some of the largest deposits of natural uranium, which is a very dense metal. Now, after it's mined, uranium is enriched, a process which separates it into 3 different properties, or isotopes as they're called. Now, 2 of those uranium properties are used in nuclear technology, and they're highly radioactive. The remaining property is known as DU, or depleted uranium. It's less radioactive, but otherwise its chemical composition is the exact same as the stuff that goes into, say, a nuclear reactor. After 40 years of testing, the U.S. military recognized that DU could be used very effectively in the battlefield, as seen here in the Gulf War. Put on the end of a missile, the DU-tipped penetrator can slice through an enemy tank, as the Army likes to say, like a knife through butter. And it has an added military bonus. DU ignites spontaneously upon explosion, increasing the destructive power of the missile. But if DU is an effective weapon, it's also a controversial one. When a DU missile explodes, part of the missile is transformed into an extremely fine dust that is saturated with depleted uranium, and part of that dust becomes airborne. The result is DU contamination of soil and air, and that may pose a health risk to soldiers and civilians who have either inhaled it into their lungs or been wounded with DU fragments.
Depleted uranium is in many ways more harmful than uranium dust. It's a little hard to predict what organ it's going to affect most because it depends on where it becomes lodged in the body. We're talking here about being able to measure the depleted uranium in the body of the veterans 8 or 9 years after the battle.
Canada used to have DU munitions in its arsenal, but it banned its usage back in 1998. So we asked the Department of Defense to explain why it stopped using DU weapons, but they declined to be interviewed. So we talked to Dr. Bill Andrews. He's an associate professor of chemical and nuclear engineering at the Royal Military College in Kingston, Ontario.
We were asked by the medical branch of the armed forces, we being RMC, to, as part of a larger team of defense scientists in the Department of National Defense, to measure the levels of uranium in urine in veterans of the Gulf War.
And the results were?
The results were within the range of the normal body burden of the general populace.
So it's fair to say that DU was not a contributing factor, in your opinion, to the health issues that they were either showing evidence of or were concerned about?
I'm not a medical doctor, but I will say that, you know, you can draw your own conclusions, but the body burden exhibited by examination of the urine excreted by these people was well within the range of the normal populace.
Dr. Andrews' findings support the position of the U.S. military. The U.S. Department of Defense has long contended that the risks associated with DU are low and that any exposure can be controlled with proper handling and training. God! But thousands of Gulf War veterans disagree. Many of them suffer from kidney ailments, respiratory problems, and cancerous tumors. And the culprit, in their minds, is DU. All right, that's the primer. Now, Major Doug Rokke studies the effects of depleted uranium. He's a physicist who helped the U.S. Army develop its DU program, but now he lobbies against it. Well, our video journalist Eric Foss followed the Major as he took his anti-DU campaign on the road.
Trouble 4 News Radio, WTAM 1100. The economy and Iraq. The president expected to warn Iraq to disarm or else, but will he reveal clear evidence that The country still has banned weapons. How slushy and slippery the roads are. First Energy reports in Old Brooklyn.
If you'd like to get the Peace Action newsletter, there's a sign-up sheet. I don't know if you already get it. There's a copy of one here.
Oh, I'm ready to go.
He's a veteran of both the Vietnam and the Persian Gulf Wars. Dr. Rokke earned a Ph.D. from the University of Illinois in 1992. He served as a health physicist for the U.S. Army Depleted Uranium Assessment Team during the Gulf War, and then as director of the U.S. Army Depleted Uranium Project from 1994 to 95.
After the Gulf War, I started writing up all the reports myself and other people that worked on this, cleaning up in the Gulf War, that we had all kinds of problems. And that led to my recall to active duty and assignment as the Depleted Uranium Project Director. Any individual that inhaled uranium dust, any individual that ingested uranium dust, any individual that's got uranium shrapnel in their body, there is absolutely no doubt, based on everything I've read, everything I've seen, personal experience, that the health problems are definitely caused. What I found was you need to remove and dispose of all uranium contamination, and you need to provide medical care to everybody, because the amount of contamination we found is so extensive, and the health effects we found are so extensive that we have no options. The uranium round is awesome in combat because it's moving extremely high velocity. It's got tremendous forces over a very small area, and so the uranium bullet just literally cuts through all armor, cuts through all buildings and everything. When we go to war, the purpose of war is two things: to kill and to destroy. And so when you go to war, you're going to use the most effective tool that you have if you're going to want to win the battle. When we went to war and we went to clean it up, they didn't know about DU and they shot this stuff up right away. And our team went forward, a team of scientists and engineers and doctors. And what we saw can only be described one way: oh my God. And we all became sick within 72 hours and have remained sick. And my team members have died from cancer. The health problems that I encountered go back from the get-go, the respiratory problems. Then I had massive kidney problems, the neurological problems, the vision problems, the rash problems. I've reached a point in my career where I have to say war is obsolete because we can no longer deal with the health and environmental consequences.
Saddam Hussein, you've been violating these agreements for the ceasefire for years. Daddy's back home. Time for a spanking.
You know, I'm a little confused because when you go on the Persian Gulf website and look at the reports on these three, they consistently say no adverse medical.
That's right, because they're
observed. So why are they?
Why?
Yeah.
They won't always use DU munitions. When you
So you're saying that they're lying about
absolutely,
these
absolutely, they are. The experience that we just had at the Cleveland Plain Dealer with the editorial staff is representative of other problems we've had trying to get the story out and get the information out. The newspaper reporters or anybody will go to the Department of Defense website for Persian Gulf War illnesses and look at what's the official doctrine, the information's there. However, the information on what truly happened in our actual reports from the work is not included on the website. Even though myself, as the acknowledged Army's expert on the use of depleted uranium effects on the battlefield, my research, my reports, and everything are not on the website. I mean, some days I'd love to be able to get out of it and just go back to a normal life. It's flat wrong.
President Bush in the State of the Union address tonight expected to warn Iraq time is almost run out, that the U.S. and coalition forces are ready to disarm Iraq through military action. Let's go live to the White House. Here's A.B.
When you're exposed to this toxic materials, the health effects can be either immediate or they can be long-term and chronic. The health effects of the Gulf War veterans continue to escalate day in and day out. They continue to get sick and they continue to die. Recently, the United States used uranium munitions in the bunker busters. in Afghanistan. When they verified that the Afghanis that are in the areas around where the uranium munitions were used, the bunker busters, were excreting uranium at 7,000 times the permissible level. You know, you don't get this uranium in your body and start excreting your urine by just thinking uranium, uranium, uranium. You have to get inhalation, ingestion, or uranium shrapnel into your body.
We will work for a prosperity that is broadly shared, and we will answer every danger and every enemy that threatens the American people.
People don't want to take the time to acknowledge and recognize that their own government would use munitions that would not only cause harm to themselves, lasting harm, but that they deliberately use munitions that would cause harm to the citizens of the earth. It's a message that people just don't want to hear.